Welcome back to the step-by-step setup guide to Home Assistant. My goal is to show the basics every person just getting started with Home Assistant needs to know to have a good experience. We left off last time just after installing our first integration. Before we can begin doing things with our devices, we need to understand what Home Assistant is doing with our devices. There are two places we need to be familiar with that display information. Number one is the Devices and Services menu. Number two is the Developer Tools States table. Both of these areas do have some overlap, but mostly they display very different types of information. We will flip back and forth between the two. Let's first look at the Devices and Services menu. In the UI, go to Configuration, then Devices and Services. By default, we first see the Integrations page, which should look familiar from the previous video. Near the top are tabs to navigate to the Devices, Entities, and Areas pages. Areas represent rooms in your home. Let's now examine a device and see what Home Assistant does with it. Please note, this is just my interpretation from a user's perspective. Let's say we have a physical device sitting on our desk. It is powered on and ready to go. To add it to Home Assistant, we install its integration. What does the integration do? It attempts to represent a physical real-world device as a virtual device that we can see on our computer screens. If we look at the Devices tab, items in this list should resemble physical real-world objects. Please note, in Home Assistant, the concept of devices is fairly new and not all integrations use this feature. The next vocabulary term we need to look at is the word service. Warning: this word, service, has multiple meanings in Home Assistant. In this context, a service is representing an internet service, like data you are bringing in from somewhere online, such as your calendar or music streaming service. While setting up your integrations, Home Assistant will separately classify services from devices in the beginning. But once we leave the integrations page, a service will then be treated just like a device, and it will be called a device. Notice in the top tabs of the Devices and Services menu, there is not a tab for services. They will be listed under Devices. Yes, the weather will now be considered a device. The next thing we are going to need from our physical devices and services is access to the information. We want data. This brings us to entities. An entity is a representation of a single, specific type of data. Examples may include temperature, humidity, motion detected, if you are home or not, and the setting of your HVAC thermostat. An entity is a placeholder for extracting out data that is important enough for us to act on. For example, here is a temperature sensor. It broadcasts blobs of data every 30 seconds. This blob of data can contain all sorts of things, not only temperature, but might also include the battery level, model number, channel, time, RSSI, or any number of things. The most important data is the temperature. An entity will extract the temperature out of the data blob so we can see it and work with it. This entity is what I will put on my dashboard to display the temperature, and later I can create automations based on this entity. Let's look at another example. This is a fancier temperature sensor that also sends out humidity readings. Both readings are important. Home Assistant will still attempt to represent this as a single device, but it will have two entities. One entity will extract the temperature data, and another entity will extract the humidity data. All the rest of the data blob is either ignored or gets dumped into attributes, which I will explain later. An entity has a formal naming structure called an entity ID. It is always in the form word.word. The first part of an entity ID is the domain, and the available domains is limited. The second part of an ID is the object. Entity IDs are always lowercase and never have spaces. Everything on your Lovelace dashboard is an entity. Some entities give you direct control, such as on or off for lights. Other entities will only display information, such as a sensor reading. We have no control over what the temperature is outside. Another way of saying this is some entities allow you to change the state, such as turn off a smart switch, and other entities do not, such as a temperature sensor. A really great feature of Lovelace is that by default, you can click on any entity to bring up even more information, and if available, even more control, such as changing the brightness of light bulbs. Next, we should become familiar with the States table. In the UI, go to Developer Tools. By default, the States table should appear. This is also often called the States page or States tab. This is a table that lists all enabled entities. This is a master list of every entity Home Assistant can see right now. If an entity is not on this list, Home Assistant cannot see it. The left column contains the entity IDs. The entity ID is the part in blue. The middle column is the actual data for each entity, boiled down to one word or a number. The data is called the state. The right column is the attributes for each entity. I think of attributes as the remainder of the data blobs after the important data has been extracted out. Usually, in most cases, this is data we would not want to base any actions on. There's a particular attribute I would like to point out because we will be using it frequently. That is friendly name. This will hold the names we give our entities in plain, everyday language. Friendly names can be anything you want and can use capital letters. If you will notice, there are two icons to the left of the entity ID. The lower icon will display a pop-up with more information and control, the very same pop-ups we saw from our dashboard. Any entity in this table can be placed on your Lovelace dashboard. In fact, notice on the States table, there is no reference to devices or the integrations that created them. All entities can be used the same way, on your dashboards and in your automations. The way I think of it, entities strip out all of the inconsistent incompatibilities between manufacturers and their closed ecosystems. Once we can get our devices into Home Assistant with entities, we can then use them any way we want. Let's look at the other method for viewing entities. Go back to the Devices and Services menu. In any integration card, click on Devices. If you have more than one device, you may need to choose from a list to get to the next screen. The middle column on this page shows the entities. We need to check this page to be sure the entities we want to use are enabled. Once enabled, the entities should now appear in the States table and also on our dashboard. If you click on the Entities tab, this is a list of all entities created through the UI. This is not a master list. Any entities created from configuration.yaml or other sources may or may not appear here. To summarize, To add a physical device or service to Home Assistant, we must install its integration. The integration will create entities and attempt to create devices. The first step after installing an integration is to check to see what it created. We can do this in two ways, using the Devices and Services menu or the States table, and I usually check both. This concludes the video. Join me next time, where I will show you how you can create and customize your own Lovelace dashboard.